Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's Advocacy Talks. We are absolutely delighted to facilitate this conversation today, which is one that has been very much sought after, and absolutely thrilled to be able to bring it to you and provide an opportunity for some Q&A today. My name is Lorna Fitzpatrick. I'm the Advocacy and Engagement Manager with NCBI, and thrilled to say that we are joined today by Independent Living Movement Ireland, or ILMI. ILMI is a campaigning National Disabled Persons Organisation, or DPO, that promotes the philosophy of independent living and seeks to build an inclusive society. Central to the way ILMI work is to ensure that policy decisions that impact on the lives of disabled people have to be directly informed by those whose lives are directly affected. Their philosophy can be summed up as nothing about us without us, and rights, not charity. ILMI's vision is an Ireland where disabled persons have freedom, choice and control over all aspects of their lives and can fully participate in an inclusive society as equals. We're joined today by Damien and Shelley, who are going to talk about ILMI and the Personal Assistance Service, PAS, and the ILMI PAS Now campaign, PAS Now campaign. And just a reminder to everybody who's joining us on the call that we would be delighted to pose any of your questions to Damien and Shelley towards the end of the presentation today. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function, which should be available to you on the top of your screen. But without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Damien to introduce and bring us through this session. Thanks very much.
Many thanks, Lorna, and many thanks to NCBI for inviting us here, myself and Shelley, to talk about Independent Living Movement Ireland, primarily to talk about personal assistance and our campaign to bring around a right to personal assistance. So we're going to divide this up into two sections. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague, Shelley Gaynor, who is our peer mentor. Shelley's going to take the first part and just go through the basics and explain what a personal assistance service is and what it does. And then Shelley's going to hand over to me. I'm going to very briefly talk about the campaign, how we've built it up and where we're at with that campaign. And then, as Lorna said, we'd be very happy to invite any questions and hopefully be able to answer those. So for the moment, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Shelley, who's going to explain about personal assistance.
Thanks, Damien. Hi, guys. What is a PA? A PA is a personal assistant. And unlike if you work in an office, it's not admin. For me, as somebody that uses a wheelchair and has a physical disability, a PA is my arms and legs. They're very different from a carer, because a carer will come into me and they would help me live my life, but ultimately they would be responsible. Where a PA, as I said, is my arms and legs. They allow me to do what I physically can't do. So under my direction. So I have had a PA for 25 years, 13 of them I've lived in my own home. So with the assistance of a PA, I can live a life like any non-disabled person. I can choose when to get up, when to go to bed. It enables me to live in the community. You know, it enables me to be a real person, because of my level of disability, if I didn't have a PA service, I would be in residential care. There's no question. So a PA allows me to be the true person that I want to be. I can live in the community. I live in a 2-bed bungalow, and I'm just like any other kind of council tenant. And I'm like any other person living in the community. My home is adapted so I can get around freely and do what I want to do. But given the nature of my disability, which is cerebral palsy, I have limited arm and hand function, and I don't walk at all. So the PA enables me to do stuff that I can't do. They assist me with shopping, they assist me with personal care, with going out and doing social life. I have my own car, so they enable me to get from A to B, all under my direction. Like many times people say to me, oh, but that's the same as a carer. A PA is the keys in the name. They're personal assistants. So they're personal to my needs and that of anyone else that uses the PA. What a PA might do for me and what they might do for another leader, which is a term that we use within independent living. A leader is somebody that directs their own service and somebody that has a physical or sensory disability, so they're able to direct their own service. And some people say they don't like the term leader, but to me it is very fitting because a PA enables a person to lead their own life. And I think that's where the name originally came from, because so many times, and I think many people on this call would agree, when they see a physical or sensory disability, when a non-disabled person sees that, they're like, oh, they can't do anything. And with a PA, it enhances your freedom, your choice and control. I've got 2 nieces and nephews, and without a PA, I couldn't be a true aunt to them. Like, I'm able to bring my niece to her training on a weekly basis, and that is very a normal thing to do. And I hate that word normal, because disabled people are normal, but you know what I mean. Because traditionally, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, disabled people would be locked away and not seen as the real people that we are. So with a PA service, I have a full active life, and that's really what independent living is to me. It enables me to do what any other 43-year-old just takes for granted. So, and the key being, they're personal to you. If you access a PA, whether a wheelchair user, blind, visually impaired, you can do what you want to do under your direction, and that's the key. And that's where it's very different than a carer, because legally, I have more responsibility over my PA than a carer would, if they're coming into my home. So that's why PA is so wonderful and unique, because it's tailored to the person with a disability, and the key being the personal bit there. I mean, over the years, I suppose, if we allow it as disabled people, it has been watered down, and one of my tried to be watered down. But if you really understand the philosophy and the importance of that you will know the difference between a carer and a PA within a second. And I think it's fair to say that within ILMI, we always say, because many of us within ILMI do have a physical disability, although we do have members with a vision impairment or sight loss, but they are unique to us, and for many of us, they are our arms and legs, and in many cases, their eyes as well. A PA enables a disabled person to do what they ordinarily wouldn't be able to do because of their impairment or disability. So on that, I'm going to hand you back over to David.
That's brilliant, Shelley. Appreciate that. And I think, when we talk about the philosophy of independent living, and Shelley's talked about that, at its core, it is disabled people being in control of their lives, making the decisions about who and where they live, how they live, and what they want to do. And really importantly, sometimes people think independent living means doing everything on your own. That's not the case. It's not doing everything for yourself. It's having the supports in place to do the things that you want to do. Simple as that. The choice, the control, the freedom, the agency that non-disabled people take for granted, as in having a job, going to college, socializing, as Shelley said, like doing the things that other aunts do, going to the GA training, bringing her nieces out to that. And personal assistance service is a support that allows a lot of disabled people to have that choice and control. As Shelley says, regardless of impairment, where people are unable to do something themselves, they direct somebody else to do that for them, but it's the direction that comes from the disabled person. That's the fundamental part. So it's really important that people get that, because as Shelley says, sometimes that gets blurred with other things. So I'm going to now talk about the Personal Assistance Service Now campaign, or PS Now, as Lorna said at the start. So I just want to give you a bit of context to this. As Lorna said in the introduction, Independent Living Movement, or ILMI, we're a cross-impairment national disabled persons organisation. So we work with disabled people all across Ireland who come together collectively, mostly online now over the last 3 years. And the policy decisions or campaigns that we developed are based on the lived experience of many, many individuals, but also the strategic direction comes from disabled people as well. So when we developed our strategic plan 4 years ago, we had 3 areas. One was around leadership and representation, that all the work locally, nationally and internationally would be led by disabled people. We would take an explicit equality and human rights approach as one of our strategic objectives. And thirdly, that we would have strategic policy and political campaigns where disabled people would work collectively together. And within that, we identified 4 core themes, because we can't work on all the issues that disabled people face. So the members decided that we would focus on employment, on housing, transport, and personal assistance. And immediately from that, then we began to engage disabled people back in the old days, face to face. And we went to people who either had a personal assistance service or may want a personal assistance service, but also people who didn't, but recognised that there was a fundamental value to work in solidarity to bring around a service that would meet people's needs. And we held a number of consultations across the country, I think from memory around 8. And we said, well, okay, and talk about personal assistance, what is it we actually need to do as a national disabled persons organisation? And through those discussions, we developed a campaign called PAS Now. And from that face-to-face discussion, which then moved into online discussion, it was around, we needed to define what a personal assistance service was. Because depending on which CHO area you're in or which service provider you went to, the definition could often be much different. And as Shelley rightly pointed out, ILMI, given that 30 years ago this year, 7 people came together and started the very first personal assistance service. This organisation has a very clear vision of what personal assistance services are. But that has changed over time. So you could access what is called a PA service in one part of the country and not have that choice and control. So we're calling for that definition to be, regardless of where a disabled person goes to get that service going, this is what it is. And it very much is embedded in the philosophy of independent living, so that we would define it, and then that we would standardise it, that the HSE in the delivery of personal assistance service or in funding personal assistance services through other organisations, that everyone could be apply in a systematic approach. So not what we would call a postcode lottery, that the assessment of need would be based on an equality and rights-based approach. It would be done inside and outside the home to give people choice and control. But unfortunately, that currently isn't the case. So you'd have a standardised approach for assessment and how people would apply for personal assistance. You'd have a universal definition. We also would ask for the promotion of the service, because Shelley can back me up. There's many times we do this and disabled people going, I've never heard about this. This could be the service that could be the key to unlocking my liberty, to allow me to do things that I currently can't do for myself, but I would like to do. So that we would have a greater conversation around promoting the value of personal assistance, to give people choice, control, options inside the home, in the workplace, socially, whatever it would be. And then on that basis, then we needed to see greater investment in personal assistance service. And we can certainly say the work that we've done over the last 3 years has had an impact there, because we've seen year on year an increase in investment in each budget in personal assistance, which is very, very welcome. And I'm fairly certain that that had stayed static since about 2008 until relatively recently. So it is important that disabled people collectively are continually saying this service could have a massive impact on our lives. This is one of the services that we need, that gives us as individuals the choice and control in our lives. And then finally, to create a legislative right to personal assistance. So as I said just there briefly, 30 years ago, 7 disabled people started a journey of independent living in Ireland. Now, obviously there's lots of campaign and work that have been going on before him, but they looked at models that were available in the United States and in Europe and said, right, this is what we need to allow us to move from institutional settings to living in our communities, that we will need the support to allow us to live independently, and started the first pilot programme for personal assistance. And it was hugely successful, and it has been, rolled out to thousands, about 2,500 disabled people, we think, around this stage. But there is no legislative right to that. And as Shelley will know, back in 2012, it was 2012 when the Troika were in Ireland, there was a suggestion that the personal assistance service budget would be slashed by 50%, which would immediately effectively remove the supports that people had relied on to live in their own homes at the stroke of a pen. And Shelley and other disabled activists campaigned outside the houses they rocked us for several nights until there was a guarantee that that wouldn't happen. But that memory has lived long in people, that going from having this support that has given people all of that at the stroke of a pen it could be removed. And that came out very strongly in the consultations in late 2018, early 2019. that other countries had a right to personal assistance. So we said we need to legislate it. So we'd define, we'd standardise, we'd promote, invest and legislate. And the PS Now campaign has been based on those 5 campaign asks. And we've continually messaged that to politicians, but also to try and get as many disabled people to talk about it. And the legislation piece is one that we have put a huge amount of energy in over the last 3 years. So we first and foremost commissioned a paper from the Centre for Disability Law and Policy in the National University in Galway, and they explored what achieving a right to personal assistance would look like in Ireland based on other jurisdictions. And they gave us 4 options, which went to the board, and the board said the most constructive and easiest way to do this would be to bring legislation, standalone legislation, into the Oireachtas to have that debate. And over the course of 2019, we built up a huge amount of allies within the Dáil and moved towards having what's called a private members bill brought in the winter of 2019. And that kind of simplifies a long process of working through the Public Interest Litigation Association, or PILA, of which we're proud members, which is a pro bono support that you can get legal firms to give advice to non-government organisations like ourselves. And through our work with Evershed Sutherland, they drafted legislation that we could bring into the Dáil. Now, we were unable to bring in a private members bill because there'd been changes to the standing orders of the Dáil in summer of 2019 that meant that where there was a potential cost to the state, only members of the government, as opposed to opposition TDs, could bring in legislation in that regard. So we had Deputy Thomas Pringle, who's an independent with a proud record of supporting the rights of disabled people and other groups who have been marginalised in society, continued to work with us so that we brought a motion into the hall, into the Dáil in November 2019, which was unanimously passed that there was cross-party support for exploring how a right to personal assistance would be brought in. And obviously that was at the end of 2019. 2020 we had a general election, we had COVID, but we managed to keep it on the agenda. So our strategy then was we would return to a conversation to bring in legislation at some point in the Dáil. And rather than waiting until that opportune moment came round, working with disabled people across the country, we were able to bring motions through each local authority to support a right for disabled people to access a personal assistant, that at each local authority we're calling on the government to legislate for that right. And in fact, we had a webinar in May 5th, which is European Independent Living Day, which Shelley spoke at, and our former colleague James Colley and some other members as well. We held a huge webinar that was directly targeting politicians to remind them that at that stage, and including one of our members, Declan Mina, who is an elected representative for Dublin City Council, he was able to drive over the line the last local authority, which was Dublin City Council. So at this stage, every local authority has passed that motion. And it is a really effective thing to be able to say that 947 councillors have supported this motion, that we need to go back and have that conversation, so that we went back into the Dáil just out in the Oireachtas room, audiovisual room, AV room in the Oireachtas, to say, look, we now need to have partners in both houses of the Oireachtas, Shannon and Dáil, to explore this, because we've been building up momentum to build that political support. So that's what we've been doing. So we will continually go back, and it would be great to get disabled people linked into the NCBI to think about this, see what role they could play. I know Lorna in recording this YouTube clip has agreed that we can post up resources there to say, look, if you want to learn more about personal assistance, we've a whole suite of videos that talk about what personal assistance services are. And then in the lead up to the May 5th campaign for that webinar, we asked disabled people who were accessing a personal assistance service to post short video blogs, and we called it the 30 days of action. So it allowed us in the run up to the May the 5th campaign to every day have a disabled person speak about why this was important, what personal assistance service meant to them, how it liberated them. And so there's a whole suite of resources that are there for anyone who, even from today, feel there's more that they want to learn about, or there's more they'd like to find out about. And ideally, really interestingly, how they can be actively involved in it, because we like any political campaign, we need more voices. We need people who can link in with ILMI and think about how they could write to their local TD or write to their senator that they know and say, look at where is this campaign at with your party, with you as an independent elected representative. We know that every local authority has passed this. Is there a way to continue to build momentum that we can eventually get a point where that we have a system that is defined, that is standardized, that is invested and increased on year? Because we know from the consultations that we've held around the country where people really want to be able to participate as equals in society. There are many disabled people, as Shelley will say, will need someone to do things that they cannot do for themselves. But the disabled people are more than capable of being in control and making those decisions. And we know that while personal assistance is not something that everyone needs, but where people need it, they should know about it. They should know to have a standardized, easy support system to apply for it. There needs to be resources there, that the investment, so that when someone requests 10, 20, 30, 40 hours based on their needs or more, that they can get it, and that when they access it, that it is something that they have as a right to allow them to live the lives with choice and control, to have freedom in how they participate in society as equals. So that's what the campaign has been built around. And I think at this point, Shelley, unless there's anything else we want to add, we could open it up for a question and answer session, if that's okay with you, Laura. What do you think, Lorna?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think that's been really, really insightful. Someone has just messaged me to say that they are having difficulty with the Q&A function. So just to acknowledge, I do have some questions that have came through, but if there are anybody who's having challenges with the Q&A function and has any particular questions, I wonder, Damien and Shelley, not to put you on the spot, but would it be okay for me to follow up with those separately as well? So if anybody hasn't had the opportunity to put the question through the function on the call today, to just message me or email me separately, and I can direct them over to Damien and Shelley directly. And again, just for ease of purpose, but I think most people here should have my email, but it's lorna.fitzpatrick@ncbi.ie. But just to move into the questions, because as I say, there are quite a few that have came through so far. And I'm just going to throw these out, and Damien and Shelley, you can decide who answers or who goes first. One of the questions that has came through, I suppose, feeds back in directly to something that you were just discussing there, Damien and Shelley. And this person has been trying to access PA for 16 years and have yet again, time and time again, being kind of turned down. And they believe that it's down to the fact that they're not classed as a priority within the system. They have a vision impairment, but they are working. And I suppose they're wondering, have you any advice, or have you came across those kind of situations in the past? And have you any advice maybe on how they could go about approaching that?
Do you want to go there or no?
It's up to you. Do you want to go first and then I can follow in?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, if you haven't already tried it, I'm a big believer in denying your local TV or local rep, because they can change mountains if they want to, and just be very vocal. Be extreme. I know it's very tiring, and you just kind of go, what's the point? But at the end of the day, you want your freedom, you want your independence, and if you are quiet and don't really fight for it, unfortunately, they will say, oh, well, so is more of a priority. But you've got to explain very clearly to your TD, because they work for all of us, whether we're disabled or not. So I'd be very keen that we all know our local TDs, and they're able to put a face to the name and let their TD know why it's so important for you to have freedom, choice, and control of your life, because there's always going to be the Johnny that says, I need it more. And unfortunately, the HSE, who fund the services, do medicalise a lot of people. So if there's a Johnny in your area that needs to get out of bed, they're going to say, in their view, because they look at it from the medical point of view, which is wrong. They don't look at the social side, and they look at the simple people what a little lives like everybody else. Then they are unfortunately going to probably prioritise that Johnny. But if you're equally as vocal and it can outline why you feel and why you should have a right to the service, it can really help. So my message would be, scourge your local TD and in turn score your HSC and get on to your OT, because they should be enabling everyone with a disability, regardless of the level, that lives in the community to access the appropriate services. So hound your TD and get onto your OT would be my big thing for you to do.
Thanks so much, Shelley.
Firstly, it's enormously frustrating that anyone should be fighting for a service that should be as a standard right for 16 years. I can't even imagine how dispiriting that is. It just shows how broken the system is and why a campaign like this is so important, because sadly it's not a unique case where due to underinvestment, and let's be honest, historic underinvestment in a service that's so badly required, that we've frequently heard that people have said, you know, I've been told I'm not a priority, or that there's X amount of hours in the system and there's nothing I can do. So I think for ILMI as a campaign and DPO is to continually say more hours into the system will hopefully at some stage get to the point where people don't have that. But in terms of fighting it, I know Shelley's right, it is exhausting. And let's be honest, no one should have to do this. But the reality of it is we'd be quite happy to give maybe some advice around that, as Shelley says, you know, to fortify people. There's certainly, we create peer spaces where you need that uplift from other people who've gone through that and say, yeah, actually, you know, both Shelley and I had a conversation with somebody you know, last week who's gone through years and years and feeling that nothing was going to happen, and then has gotten the answer due to their resolve, but also the wider peer support. Again, no one should have to do this. That's the reality of it. But it is to, you know, kind of feel that, you know, other people have done it. It's not that anyone should feel they have to, but sadly, it's that kind of thing of going, getting peer support, getting the kind of political system to say this is what I want, but also, you know, taking that rights-based approach, using that language, going, not accepting the idea, as Shelley says, of medicalising that there's greater need. It's for someone saying, I need to prioritise my needs. This is what I need. You know, come to us if you want kind of some language around, this is what I need as a disabled person for my choice, my control. And this is what I think is a minimum. As Shelley says, we've done something there a while ago called Pathways to PAS, Pathways to PAS, around that assessment and need process that is also on our website. But I think Shelley's point around the political campaigning, but not to underestimate, because there's an emotional toll to have to go up against a system, that peer support can be really, really important in that regard as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And again, I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of both Shelley and Damien around the fact that it shouldn't be a requirement to have to fight for this. But unfortunately, that is where we are. And again, for anyone on the call, and we've done this in the past, if anyone needs support in terms of getting in touch with TDs and all of that kind of stuff, in terms of finding out who they are and how to contact them, again, we're always more than happy to help. And we will link the ILMI website as well and send that around to everybody, so you can access the resources that Damien and Shelley have kind of referenced as well. The next question that has came in is a very, I suppose, a very interesting one for everyone in terms of the actual logistics of PAs, and for anyone who does have a PA. Do you have the same person, a PA, all the time, or does that person change? And I suppose I have a follow-up question to that depending on the answer. But is it the same person all of the time who would offer the same PA, or who would be the PA support? Or does that person change regularly, daily, weekly, or does it depend?
Do you want me to go?
I think as someone who leads her own service, I'll leave this one to you, Shelley. You're the expert.
Ideally, if you were the service provider, the disabled person should be in control of their service. There's three different models. There's a self-directed model, there's a support model, and there's a direct payment model. Now, most people in this country will have a self-directed one through a service provider, and there's a couple of different service providers throughout the country. But ideally, a personal assistant, and that's why I say personal is the key there, should be the one person at all times. And that's why I said earlier on that sometimes not sometimes, but a lot of times nowadays, if a person works with a disabled person, service providers who will name this call everybody a PA, and that kind of really annoys me. So ideally, if you were in a self-directed service with a service provider, you should have the one person. And they because you're in control of your service. When you're with a service provider and you have a self-directed service, it means that the leader, which in this case is the disabled person, should have complete control over who's coming into their home and who's supporting them. So I have direct payments, and that means that I'm the legal employer. So yes, my PA will be the same person all the time. But now I've heard the stories through my job and within my own personal life that if you're with a service provider, they can change the PA on a regular basis, which really doesn't work because that doesn't make them a PA, it makes them a carer. So it's very important when you're looking for a package, because that's what the agency call it, when you're looking for a support package, that you state very clearly with your OT that you're looking for a self-directed service, and that will should put you in the driving seat, that anyone that is going to support you in any way, whether it be social or for personal care or work, that you have the one person all the time, because otherwise it is like having a carer coming in. Monday I might have Joan, Tuesday I might have Mary, and it kind of dilutes the reliability of the service and what you can access with PA. So ideally, in my view, if a person has a PA service, they should always have the same person. But bear in mind, it does depend on your package. If you only have 10 hours, your service provider might say, well, 10 hours isn't going to give somebody a working week. So wages wise, they might work 10 hours with you and might go to me for another 20 hours. So it really depends on you as the leader, as the disabled person, and indeed the service provider. But in an ideal world, you should have the same person at all times. That's a bit waffly of an answer, but it's so different for so many different people. But if you have a decent package and you have something like 30 to 40 hours, which many people do, I'd be over that. I would have the same people working with me all the time. And I think that's very important because it builds up trust, it builds up, comfort as well. Like nobody wants to have Mary today and John tomorrow and then never see John again. Like, because the key being it's personal to your needs. So I wouldn't be happy even when I was with a service provider for 19 years if they tried to send somebody in new every day of the week.
I think the really important part that Shelley said, in the ideal proper service that's led by a disabled person, whether they're directly employed or staff, or that they have a service that they provide a huge amount of direction. And you have to remember, within the personal assistance service, Shelley says the leader is in control, so that they define the relationship with their PAs. So ideally, there is that part because they're either directly employing or have a huge personal relationship to direct the PAs, that it is either an individual or a roster of people who they know who come in depending on the level of it. But in the not so good services, it does become very agency and roll over. But when we're saying clearly about a defined, well-resourced service, that direct relationship is there. And again, depending on the amount of hours a week, maybe more than one PA, could be several PAs covering, over the course of the week.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think we've answered the next question, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to ask it nonetheless. In terms of setting the direction for the duties and the tasks and the assistance that's provided, the question is, how does the disabled person set that? And I suppose that comes back to them being the leader, I think, is what I'm hearing coming through. But is there anything more you'd like to add to that?
Pure sport can be very good, and to be very clear about your job description, because even if you are a service provider, which many people start off on that road, you would still, to be a good leader and to give the PA clear kind of direction, I would always give a job description. So basically, that's just setting out the task and the responsibilities that you want a PA to cover So, and also, as Damon alluded to earlier, peer support on that one is vital, because I have a service now 25 years, 13 of them in my own home, within my own community. But even now, I would go back to my peers, many of them within ILMI, and I would say, does that really cover what I'm looking for here? Like, if you didn't know anything about me, is that a clear enough direction? So I think job specs are very important, and job roles is very important to be very clear about what you want out of the PA. And it is natural when you're only beginning the road of using the PA to be very unsure about what you need, because it's a learning curve. So it's okay to pick up the phone or email a friend who might be using the PA service, but just to be very clear about what you want to get out of your service. And so in order to be very clear, you have to really think about what you need. I'm constantly recruiting at the moment, and I'm constantly looking at my job spec and my ad going, does that really give a clear picture of what Jenny wants to get out of her PA? So I think job specs and job roles and reaching out to other people that use the PA services is vital for that.
That's great. Thank you so much. And the next question is, there's loads of questions, but I think we're coming close to the end, but this is fantastic. It's great to have so many questions coming through. But the next question relates to training and training that are available to PAs. And the way this person has drafted the question is that because sight loss can impact people in a very different way and is also very different to other disabilities, do the PAs have the opportunity to learn how best to support people with sight loss in particular? And I wonder if I could possibly add to that as well, in terms of do people have the opportunity to meet with possible PAs in advance and make sure that, you know, they can have that conversation, because obviously there's the high level training around what different sight loss might mean for different people, but on a personal level, I suppose it's important to have that opportunity to have a discussion with somebody as well. So is that an opportunity that's available before you sign the dotted line, I suppose, with an individual, or is it just, is that not an option that's available to people?
It's up to you. Do you want?
You go for it now, come in then.
Okay, yeah. Well, in terms of training, we did invest, and we published a very large document called the Leader Manual. So it gives, our primary role is to empower disabled people to think about how they control their service, to have the confidence to give direction to a PA, to think about boundaries, to think about if they were managing the staff, to, you know, to be able to direct the service to meet their needs. And that is often that, regardless of the training directly the PA gets, the disabled person leading the service needs to be able to identify and direct the service to their needs. Because this is, you know, people talk about person-centered. This is the ultimate person-centered. That it is up to each individual to have the confidence and the self-belief to define exactly what they need their PA to do. I'm struck, Shelley, like we have some videos up, and I'm thinking back to the late Hubert McCormick, who passed away this year. Yes. I was one of the first people in Ireland to have a personal assistant service, and it's on our website. And Hubert says, like, when he first got a PA, like, I mean, because there was none of this, there was no manual. He was going, I've got someone in my life now, and I don't know what to do to tell them. To have the confidence to go, when I need something, I'll tell you. You know, that was what he's going. That's a hard thing. So for everyone to have that confidence of going, okay, I'll, you know, when I need my PA, this is, and to direct them going, so you need to be there, but when I need you, I'll tell you, and I'll give you the direction exactly what it is. You know, could be something to do with a computer, or could be to do with, you know, if it's in the workplace, you know, filing, or could be acting as a scribe or whatever. So that part for us is the empowerment, the confidence building, and the peer support is so important, because obviously nobody's impairment is the same, or what they'll want in life is the same, but just to even get that confidence, yeah, it's okay to do X, or it's perfectly acceptable to do Y, that you now begin to define the boundaries that you want. So that's the really important part. When you talk about a training of a PA, obviously the employers, if it's a service provider, will give the very mechanical basics of it, but for us, the crucial part is the disabled person having the confidence to say, this is what I want and done in this way, and because this is what I need in my life. And if you think about this point going back, Shelley mentions it. If you think about something like home support, it tends to be very functional, and someone's in for a half an hour and they'll do task A, B, and C, often whether or not people want it at that particular time. Whereas a PA is around, I'm going to need you to come to the house at such and such time to help me to do X, and then we're going to get the bus, we're going to go to work. And then, you know, I might need some assistance around this particular task in work, or this particular task getting to and from work, or whatever it might be. And within that leader manual, we list the full expression of what that could be. Within the pathways to personal assistance, we talk about the full list of things that a personal, and again, the list is not exhaustive because it depends on each individual, depends on where they're at in their life journey. So a disabled person in college versus a disabled person going for a pint or going to the cinema, or all of those things are completely different, and it depends. So from our perspective, it's empowering the disabled person, regardless of their impairment, to think, what is it I need to be able to have choice and control of my life, to be the person that I want to be? Because when we're thinking about this, when we talk about disability, we're taking this from a social model perspective. We're thinking around, it is society that is disabling people by not putting the appropriate supports in place, or having policies or procedures, or the built environment, or how information is communicated when in non-accessible forms. That's disabling people from participating in society as equal. So if we take that approach, then the personal assistance service is fundamentally a system that allows people to participate in society in the way that they want. So I'll pass over to Shelley in that regard.
Yeah, I think if you an awful lot of the males are there. For me, as a disabled person, obviously, but I don't have a vision impairment. And for me, as Stephen said, it is about the disabled person, regardless of the impairment, having the confidence to go, you know, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And to answer the question specifically, is there training specifically for, you know, people that don't, or indeed the blind? The answer I'd have to say would be no, because a lot of the time when you're dealing with a HSE, they only care about the physical stuff. So as a direct payments person, I have a direct budget. The mandatory training that my staff had to do is all to do with physical side of stuff. So they'd have to go and do house training and in general. But as a leader with a visual impairment, or if you're blind, it would be up to you to say to your service provider, if you think X and Y could be very valuable for you and your PA to do, but then it would be up to you to be very vocal to your service provider and say, this is a type of training that I want my staff member to go on. Now, you might get a bit of resistance, or then again, you might not. It just depends. And then it's a real case of thinking about what you want the PA to know. Like, I was trying to train somebody in there the other day, and they asked me a very personal question, and I just answered it by saying everything to do with me is on a need to know basis. So, you know, it would depend what type of training you had in mind, because you've got to bear in mind a PA, if they're a genuine PA, wouldn't be a carer. So therefore, I don't feel my staff need to know about my impairment. So it's up to yourself as the disabled person and as the leader. If you feel they need to go for specific training about, you know, sight loss or vision impairment, that would be between you and the PA and your service provider. But for me as an individual, I don't think my PAs need to know about my impairment. Over time, I might let them know one or two things, but it's on a need to know basis. So it's up to you as an individual whether you want that PA to know that, because sometimes it might backfire again in a negative way. So it's a real case of whatever you feel will work for you. But bear in mind, if they're a genuine PA, they won't be care oriented.
That's a really good answer, and I think that's a heading that I think we could all carry through in terms of it's up to you, and it's what's best for you, and that's really, I think, a great heading to come from that. So thanks so much for that, Shelley. I have two last questions that have came through. The first is in relation to the legislation that Damien, you had mentioned, and the person asking the question was just wondering, has there been any more steps forward, I suppose, in getting the right to personal assistance into a legislative kind of backing since the motion passed in the Dáil and in the local authorities? And I should say it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge Thomas Pringle. I know you did as well, and he's a phenomenal advocate for people, particularly disabled people as well. So just to acknowledge Thomas Pringle and the fantastic work he has done over the years. But yeah, I suppose the question is what's happening next, maybe, in terms of getting that right into the legislation, or has that been progressed?
Many thanks, Lorna. So we obviously had a technical effectively block around bringing legislation. The motion was great, but we needed a private members bill to go in that would allow us to bring it from second stage, ideally with government support, to get to committee stage, because we needed discussion at committee stage to provide a spotlight for personal assistance services. Like, if you look at the overall 2 billion that is spent on disability annually in Ireland, it's a tiny fraction. And like that, as you have had someone that said they're waiting 16 years to get what they need. Our contention has always been is that surely there should be a greater investment in supports that give people choice and control. And if we think about post-ratification of the United Nations Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or CRPD, that it fundamentally, the CRPD is about investing in inclusion. It is about looking at moving away from antiquated models or supports that separate or segregate disabled people. It should be around ensuring that every disabled person can participate in society as equals. And we know that this is one of the supports that allows that. So, we had a webinar on the 5th. We had great support. We had the Minister for Disability, Anne Rabbitte, committed to ensuring that was a budgetary line that she would invest in year on year. We have a department that's very keen to talk around how to manage this. I'm sure anyone that is looking at how things have changed over time, the transfer of undertakings of disability from the Department of Health to the new Department of Equality, Children, Disability, Integration, Youth has been very slow for a number of reasons. So we had an in-person discussion in September of this year. Oh, sorry, it was July. I'm trying to think in my timelines, in July. And there's a huge amount of support at a political level. And what we're negotiating now is with Thomas Pringle and others, is there a way to get around Dáil Standard Order 179 that would allow us to do that? So we still are exploring that, because we have the legislation drafted. It holds water at a comparable level with other international jurisdictions. It makes a very clear pathway for how that legal right would be realised. And we're hopeful that at some stage in 2023 that we will get a private members bill brought in, with ideally with cross-party support, to get to that committee stage, because that's where you could actually say, how would you construct a system that actually defines what personal assistance services are, that resources it, that promotes it, standardizes it, and then legislates for it? Because ultimately we have a situation where you have a fragmented system that is 30 years old, has never had that statutory footing, has never had that really in-depth approach that every disabled person was directed to where they needed it, and that sadly that someone is waiting 16 years to access it to meet their needs. That's where we need to have that exploration going. Actually, we need to design a system that actually meets people's needs post CRPD. So we're hopeful in early 2023 to expand that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, I think it's phenomenal to see it kind of go through those stages. And I know legislation and so on can be a difficult and a slow process. And as you say, there can be those technical blocks. But it's great to hear that there is so much support there from a political side to trying to get this through as well. So that's fantastic. The last question that has came through is in terms of how people can get involved with the campaign. Is it best to just directly link in with ILMI, and how best would people connect with you, I suppose?
Wonderful. We're always looking to get people involved. I mean, when we're talking about building a rights-based equality movement, you get strength in numbers. Ideally, getting people who bring energy, passion. That's what we always have. There's always the advantage, as Shelley said, of how vital peer support is, and that peer connection for people feeling that their voice matters. So we'd welcome that in any way, shape, or form. I'd always say, you know, there's a huge amount of stuff that we deliver online that people could get a huge amount of, you know, opportunity to participate in. So first stage, either like to email info@ilmi.ie or visit the website www.ilmi.ie, and then there's not only a whole load of resources, you know, video resources, documents, you know, they're there in PDF or accessible MS Word versions that, you know, talk about a right to personal assistance, achieving a right to personal assistance, the pathway to personal assistance, the leader manual. There's a lot of information there. But also then if someone just says, look at, I'm, you know, either to the connect form on the website or direct email going, I'd like to know more about the campaign, how we get involved. We gladly pick that up with anyone at any stage, and you know, give them options around what we're doing online and how people can bring their voice to that campaign, because it's really, really important that as many people do, and on that cross impairment basis, that they're saying, look at, I may not need a PA now, but I see the value in being part of that campaign, because who knows, I might need one in the future. So that's, I don't know, Shelley, have I missed that in that regard?
No, that's the way to get all of us, and as you say, we're always looking for new blood and new voices, and we're sounds really political, but the two, we're stronger together, and we really are. The more people we are pushing in the right direction, the better it's going to be for everyone. So yeah, please get in touch.
Absolutely, that's great. And I've actually just got another message in there, which is again feeding into something similar that we had earlier on in the questions and answers around people who are blind or vision impaired feeling forgotten about by the PA system, and people need help with simple things, not help getting out of bed. That's not what some people require. It's the others. Yeah, and I think you really spoke to that today, Shelley, in terms of it being led by the individual and what the person needs, and that it shouldn't be John gets prioritized over Mary, using two fake people there, and again just reiterating in this that we need the social model of disability, not the medical model. I think this person is preaching to the converted in terms of talking to everyone on this call today. Okay, is there anything else, Damien or Shelley, that you'd like to mention before we wrap up today?
Just remember that we don't shout and look for the services, we're never going to get them. Yes, we shouldn't be fighting for them, but the more people look for PA service, the more they have to look at the service and widen the net for all persons with disability to have a right to a PA service. Because you're right, your people long here today are right. Like, it's not only about getting out of bed, it's not only that we got Johnny up in bed and he got fed or he's looking up in the shower. It's the everyday things. It's helping somebody get to the bus, it's helping somebody get to work. But if we don't look for that service as disabled people, we're not going to get it. And you're completely right. We need to be looking at the social model and not the medical model. But if disabled people don't look for that, the HC are quite happy to just carry on the way they're going. And that, unfortunately, is the medical model. So us as disabled people, we need to say quite loudly that it's not only about getting up in bed, it's everyday things. It's about being a mom, about being a dad, it's about being a brother or a sister. But unless we tell them to the HSE, they're not going to know, because traditionally in this country, it's all about being, you know, disabled people have to be looked after. That's unique about PA service. It's not about looking after the disabled person, it's about giving them control, choice, freedom, and options over their own lives. But if we as disabled people don't go looking for it quite loudly and get to know our TDs and get to speak to our OTs in the community, then we're never going to get a right to a PA service. So use your voice media, get on the email and do what you have to do, because if you don't go looking for it, they're never going to come back and your door. Unfortunately, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Shelley. And I think they're great words to end on. Unless, Damien, is there anything further you wish to add?
No, I think Shelley's absolutely nailed it. If people just take that piece from our conversation, to me, that's the crucial part. It's knowing that a personal assistance service potentially is a tool to liberate disabled people, and while we're not there yet, people need to fight to think of that as a right, even if it might not be yet. And to learn more about what personal assistance service, and as Shelley said, it's not about the impairment, it is about liberating people. It's about people giving people choice and control. And that we're just delighted to have that opportunity to talk about it. But yeah, Shelley's nailed it all as always, so appreciate that.
Fantastic. Look, thank you both so much for joining us today. Absolutely delighted to have had you here and to be able to share the word around ILMI and the campaign that you're running and the really phenomenal work that you're doing to ensure that PA services and the PA scheme is a right for everybody and in a consistent manner across the board and isn't just a lucky dip, I suppose, or a postcode lottery, as many things can be. So just want to really say thank you. Again, if anybody had any challenges with the questions and answers and wants to have anything particularly directed towards Damien and Shelley, you can either send it to me directly, or as Damien has mentioned, the contact details for ILMI are available on the website, and we'll put those into the email out to everybody who is registered as well. If you're not watching this live and you're watching back on YouTube, if you check out the footnotes, there will be some links to the website and the different resources that Damien and Shelley have mentioned today. Just on behalf of NCBI and on the advocacy team, just want to again say thanks very much for joining us today. We will have another advocacy talks in December to wrap up the year. So please do keep an eye on the website and your emails for more information on that. But finally, just to say thanks once again to Damien and Shelley and to ILMI, and really great to have been able to engage with you today and to have so many questions answered on behalf of advocates from NCBI. So thanks a million.
Thanks so much, Lorna. Thank you, everybody.